Hello, this is Jack again with John Stuart Mill Society. Time for part two of my series on John Stuart Mill's book on liberty, 1859 book. Um, this next part I'm going to talk about is also on page 14, as my last one was, and connected, but it's not necessary that for you to have listened to the previous session. But so let's get right to it. This is keeping with the same theme of silencing of opinions, and so here's what he says. Let's start with the first sentence. First thing you need to understand, as he says, is the opinion which it is attempted to suppress by authority may possibly be true. Now that one is quite obvious. You might think that nobody disagrees with that, but look around, people. It's not that obvious, it seems. The opinions are suppressed all the time, and people rarely stop to think, well, maybe the opinion that I'm suppressing might be true. People rarely think that, so that's something that actually does need to be said. Now let's continue on. What else does he say? He says, those who desire to suppress it, of course, deny its truth, but they are not infallible. They have no authority to decide the question for all mankind and exclude every other person from the means of judging. To refuse a hearing to an opinion because they are sure that it is false is to assume that their certainty is the same thing as absolute certainty. Now here's the best part of this section. Pay attention to this one. He says, all silencing of discussion is an assumption of infallibility. Let that one sink in. I'll say it again. All silencing of discussion is an assumption of infallibility. In other words, how could it be anything but that? When you say no, you're not allowed to express your opinion. You're not allowed to have that opinion. My opinion is the correct opinion. I'm not only so sure. I'm so sure that my opinion is correct that your opinion can't even be voiced in the public sphere. That's how sure I am. That's an assumption of fallibility. That's saying, no, I'm not just pretty sure, or I don't have good evidence. No. I am positive. I am, as Mill says, infallible on this viewpoint. Now, people won't say that, oh, I'm infallible here, but that's essentially what they're saying. To say that I am so perfectly sure that I'm correct on this that your opinion can't even be voiced. You just can't have that opinion. What else could that be but an assumption of infallibility? But of course they don't recognize that, because as Mill says, those who desire to suppress it, of course, deny that it's truth. But as Mill says, they are not infallible. And more importantly, they have no authority to decide the question for all mankind and exclude every other person from the means of judging. So, I mean, even if they are right, even if the other person is wrong, by what authority do they suppress other people's opinions? Now, most people would agree with that, but some people might say, well, but if you're right and they're wrong, and we're absolutely sure of this, well, then why not? What's the harm? Well, first of all, you're not always going to be sure. You're not always going to be sure. Maybe this time you are, but you're not always going to be sure. And do you really want to give somebody that kind of power? To say, no, you can't be heard. You must be silenced. I don't want to give anybody that power. And I refuse to acknowledge anybody who says that they have that power. I don't acknowledge it, and I suggest that nobody else does either. Nobody should have that kind of authority. I do not recognize anybody claims to have that kind of authority. Finally, the last point that I haven't addressed yet, he says, to refuse a hearing to an opinion because they are sure that it is false is to assume that their certainty is the same thing as absolute certainty. This connects to the last part. I think the last sentence, the one that I covered first, was was better said, and so I don't really need to cover that any further. So yeah, again, that's just one paragraph from Mill. That's amazing. It's amazing that somebody was saying this at this time, and it's incredibly relevant today. But just think about, especially the last section that I repeated. All silencing of discussion is an assumption of infallibility. Think about that, especially if you've ever considered silencing other people's opinions.